In the years leading up to the independence of Kashmir, the state of Muslims was extremely sensitive due to the blatant disregard for national and religious unity amongst the Muslims. Now, despite his busy schedule while spreading the message of Islam and Ahmadiyyat throughout the entire world, it was Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II, Hazrat al-Masih II, who would become the primary proponent in reconciling the situation in Kashmir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to another episode of Ahmadiyyat, Roots to Branches.
I came merely to sow the seed. That seed has been sown by my hands. It will now grow and blossom forth, and none dare impede its growth. Ahmadiyyat, the true Islam, is the flourishing tree. But this is not just any tree. This is the tree, the seed of which was sown under the guidance of Allah Himself, through the hands of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salatu wasalam, the promised Messiah and Imam Mahdi. Its miraculous growth in the midst of difficult and seemingly impossible circumstances is indeed a tale that is bound to increase one's faith, as if this is the tree that grew from concrete. Presently, under the guidance and leadership of our beloved Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hands, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat is now present and propagating the peaceful message of Islam in over 200 countries around the world. The Jamaat has built over 15,000 mosques, over 30 hospitals, and over 500 schools. It has translated the Holy Quran into over 70 languages. This is but merely a glimpse at the progress and a fraction of the achievements of Ahmadiyyat in only one single century. But this is Ahmadiyyat at present. Let us now take a step back and witness exactly how Ahmadiyyat, by the sheer grace of Allah, reached this point and attained these heights. For history is not only a means to understand and appreciate the present, but also a means to envision the future. Follow us on this journey.
On today's episode of Roots to Branches, we will be taking a look at how Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu came to know of the dire situation in Kashmir, where an attempt was being made to completely eradicate Islam from within it. We will then see that how, upon coming to this realization, Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu took it upon himself to ensure that measures were taken to rectify the situation within Kashmir. We will then see how two prominent letters, which were sent by two great authorities to Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, further proved that it was him and him alone who would lead the charge in reconciling the situation which was taking place in Kashmir. But first, let us begin by taking a look at a gift which was sent to the Viceroy at that time and the dire state of Muslims which was taking place.
Lord Irwin was a viceroy in India from 1926 to 1931. He was a religious man of great character, and in his 5 years of service, he exemplified brilliant qualities. When he was to return to England, he received many gifts and presents from the Indian people. Now, whereas other people gave him material wealth and material gifts and presents, Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu presented him a book that he had written in his honor. The name of this book was A Gift for Lord Irwin. Now, in the first chapter of this book, Hazur, may Allah be pleased with him, recognized and praised the services of Lord Irwin. And then he turned his attention to a very sensitive matter, and he said that the Muslims of India had suffered greatly under British rule, in that the Islamic society had almost totally been erased. And he also urged Lord Irwin to, upon his return to England, to familiarize and educate the people of England and the British people of the fundamentals of this religion of Islam so that they could better understand it. He said that it was now up to the people of England to foresee that Muslims in India were given their due rights and were given the chance and the opportunity to progress in their educational and religious endeavors. In the second and third chapters, Hazur, may Allah be pleased with him, spoke about the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, gave an introduction, and then he spoke about the 22 fundamental principles of our community. And so this was a book that was presented as a gift to Lord Irwin, and it was pleasantly received. And thus did Hazrat Muslim Mahmood Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu fulfill his responsibilities as a representative of the religion of Islam. Now, on one hand, whereas we see Hazur, may Allah be pleased with him, urging non-Muslims to grant the Muslim population their due rights, we see that Hazur was equally concerned with the internal welfare and the well-being of the Muslim Ummah as a whole. And so in 1931, in this very same year, Hazur once again called upon the Muslims of the world to unify and unite against dangerous external elements. And this is something that was acknowledged by Hindu newspapers as well, one of which quoted and said that ever since the inception of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, since the time of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad ﷺ, the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, a phenomenal transformation and revolution had occurred within the Muslim Ummah, and Muslims around the world had more or less on occasion unified around the Holy Quran.
On July 2nd, 1931, Sahibzada Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, son of the promised Messiah ﷺ, passed away at the age of 80 years old. Now his funeral prayer was led on the very same day by Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. It had been the good fortune of Sahibzada Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu to be able to pledge allegiance at the hands of Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu only a short while before his demise. Now, he was known to be a great writer, a prolific writer actually, and he would write many articles for various newspapers and magazines, and aside from this, he had authored around 47 books. Now, upon his demise, because he was known around India for his writing, the shock was very widespread, and many literary circles wrote memoirs regarding him, and they said that Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib, Sahibzada Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, would produce articles in a very short amount of time, and if anyone ever approached him asking him to write an article on any topic, he would very swiftly and very diligently write a very interesting article on whatever the topic was. And it was in this way that it was being said at the time that a large void was being felt in the world of Urdu literature. Now, upon receiving the news of this demise, Hazrat Chaudhry Muhammad Zafrullah Khan Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu wrote a letter to Hazrat Muslim Mahmood Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. And in this letter, he wrote that he felt, and many people felt, that the countenance, the appearance of Sahibzada Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu resembled that of the promised Messiah ﷺ. And he also wrote that when Sahibzada Mirza Sultan Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu would be humming a poem, it would almost sound as if the promised Messiah ﷺ was humming. And he wrote that, near the end of his life, I saw a purity emanating from within him. And perhaps it was this very purity which allowed him to be led by God the Almighty to pledge allegiance at the hands of Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu.
When one reflects on the brilliance of Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih Awwal Radiyallahu Anhu, he is amazed at the perspicacity of his person, his farsightedness. He always had the ability to look at something and see right through it to the very essence, the nucleus of the matter. And what's amazing is that every step that he took in his far-reaching journeys opened up volumes of information anew for him. And every breath that he took of new lands casted open so many vistas and profundities of thought. And it was no less when he visited Kashmir. In fact, he says that when I returned from Kashmir, he says, all night I lie awake. I couldn't sleep. Because he says, I realized that upon reflection of Surah Maryam, the 19th chapter of the Holy Quran, where it says that the heavens well nigh may be rent asunder, and the earth and the mountains may cleave asunder into pieces. At that time, he says that upon reflection of the mention of mountains, it occurred to me, and this reality hit him very, very, very profoundly. He says it was a deep realization that the people of Kashmir, and in fact the people within the mountainous region of the Himalayas, the periphery of Kashmir, would go to play a pivotal role in the second manifestation of the promulgation of the message of Islam. And he says, that's when I realized that finding true spirits within these mountains, true pure hearts, and spreading the message of Islam and Ahmadiyyat to them would actually hold the future in its hands regarding the future of Ahmadiyyat and Islam in Kashmir, and in fact the entire land of the subcontinent of India. And not only this, but Kashmir was to go and play a huge role starting from the Shuddhi movement forward in the time of Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II as well.
You know, it's so beautiful, Sabat Sahib, when we look at the life of Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and we see how much love he had for the Muslim nation. He couldn't go to sleep at night thinking that these Muslim nations were being destroyed. And so along with his prayers, his wish in his heart was that the Muslim Muballighin, the Ahmadi Muslim missionaries would go forth and they would spread the message of Islam. Now, when the time came, and Hazrat Muslim radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the Khalifa of that time, at that time we see that his actions were exactly the same. He not only prayed, but he sent his Muballighin to go and defend the religion of Islam and to bring people towards the religion of Islam. Now, we see, for example, that the Muslims at the time in Kashmir and Jammu were such that they were Muslims by name, but unfortunately all their actions showed that they were Hindu. Now, we see, for example, that those Muslims that were living there, they used to have idols in their homes. And those idols were those that they used to pray towards, that they used to, instead of praying to Allah the Almighty, they used to pray towards those idols. Or the clothes that they wore were of Hindu nature, or the food that they ate, the way they spoke. Everything showed that they had a huge influence of the Hindu religion upon them. So we see that the Shuddhi movement, they came in like a flood. And every single Muslim that they touched would easily come towards Hinduism. But it was the blessings of the Khalifa of the time. It was the blessings of the divinely appointed prophecies of Allah the Almighty that Hazrat Muslim radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he sent forth the missionaries. He sent forth Hazrat Hafiz Roshan Ali Sahib radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Hazrat Abu Lata Jalandhari Sahib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. All these missionaries went. And not only did they neutralize the stronghold of the Hindus there, but they sparked a spiritual life into the Muslims that were there. And that dry land became alive, and those people who were previously Muslim only by name truly started to become Muslims. And it shows that all the actions, all the propaganda of all the other sects of Islam couldn't do anything. But the divinely guided Ahmadi Muslims went forth and they defended Islam and brought people towards the true religion and a true relationship with God Almighty.
Since the 1840s, Muslims living in Kashmir were suffering greatly under the hands and the rule of a tyrant government, the Maharaja. Now, almost a century later, in 1931, the situation escalated and the Maharaja resorted to brutal violence, murdering dozens upon dozens of Muslims. Hazrat Muslim Mahmood radiallahu ta'ala anhu was watching these events unfold with a lot of pain and anguish in his heart. And so in 1931, the very same year, he called upon leading Muslims of that time and urged them to assist and rescue these people who were suffering. It was decided that a committee would be established and it would be called the All India Kashmir Committee. And it was also suggested by Sir Muhammad Iqbal Sahib that Hazrat Muslim Mahmood radiallahu ta'ala anhu should be elected the president of this committee. Initially, Huzur, may Allah be pleased with him, refused. Firstly, because he did not want to enter into any sort of politics. And secondly, because he knew that the Muslim population of India at that time would oppose his leadership because he was the Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. Now, seeing the persistence of the other members of the committee and Huzur's own desire to rescue these suffering people, Huzur ultimately agreed, and so he became the president of the All India Kashmir Committee. Now, under Huzur's vibrant leadership, this committee led a successful campaign in compelling the Maharaja to grant civil rights to those Muslims who had not experienced anything like this for the past century. And they were essentially freed from their slavery and freed from bondage. And with this, an aspect of the prophecy of Muslim Mahmood radiallahu ta'ala anhu was fulfilled, in which the promised Messiah ﷺ was revealed by God Almighty, that the Muslim Mahmood would be a means of procuring the release of those held in bondage.
There's a very famous saying that goes, you can't please everybody. This held so true for Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II radiallahu anhu. Imagine that this man is constantly submerged in efforts that are literally effervescing over borders to try and vitiate the difficulties amidst the Maharaja, the Hindus and the Muslims. Then there's the Boundary Commission. Then there's the entire ordeal of the Muslims' rights in Kashmir. And he's at the forefront of all of this. Then on top of this, this is what he's doing in the way of action. He spends his nights and days praying. And yet, despite all of this, the mischief mongers would have their way. And as such, they attempted almost aggressively to try and spread the false rumor that it is not when success started being had and the fruits of this very anciently planted tree began to appear. They tried to argue that Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II radiallahu anhu actually had very little to do or almost had nothing to do with this success, and that he was not a key player. Now, normally Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II radiallahu anhu, what care or fret would a man of his level of humility have with his own fame? Instead, it was his undying indignation for the Jamaat and those humble servants who were literally going days without food or water and breaking themselves physically, emotionally, psychologically through sleep deprivation for days and days at a time. They had abandoned their comfort, and he could not stand that an entire community that had worked so laboriously and so very hard toward all of these grand objectives should be cut asunder and cast to the side as something insignificant and hollow. And so he resorted to presenting two very important, pivotal, and authoritative letters by virtue of which he would prove what the true stance of Course Sajid Sahib was regarding Jamaat Ahmadiyya's involvement and his own involvement in all of these huge tasks.
You're very right. If you truly want to know how successful a person is, you look at the jealousy that comes with the success. And so when people saw that Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the Khalifa of this very small Jamaat Ahmadiyya, was providing the solution to all the problems that were happening in Hindustan, especially in the matters of Kashmir, they became jealous. And out of jealousy, they began to say that it was not the efforts of Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu that was, the solution to the problems of Kashmir. So the two letters that Hazrat Muslim Maud alludes to, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, are monumental. The first letter we know is from Lord Wellington. Lord Wellington writes to Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he says that essentially we have taken every single guideline, every single principle that you have brought forward, and we are working tirelessly in order to bring them to legislation, so that the people of Kashmir can be in reconciliation and that there may be peace once more. And what's amazing is he is adopting an apologetic stance. He says, we're sorry that you feel this way. We're sorry that this is happening to you. But he says, I want to assure you that we have peace in our heart, that you are heading this committee so that there may be reconciliation and peace in Kashmir. The other letter we see is from the assistant to the Prime Minister. Now, the assistant, obviously, he is writing whatever the Prime Minister is feeling, whatever the Prime Minister is doing. And the Prime Minister, being the head of the country, he is in charge of whatever matter is happening. But the assistant writes to Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, although the Prime Minister is in charge of everything, he is giving preference to all the matters that you have outlined. And he is making sure to bring forward all those principles, almost giving no preference to the other matters, giving preference mainly to these outlines, to these principles, and trying to make sure that they go to legislation, trying to make sure that in Kashmir they are applied and peace is made throughout the land. Now we see through these letters that the two greatest authorities in the land, they're assuring Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, saying, you're the one who is the main benefactor in bringing peace in Kashmir. And we see that Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he didn't have any wish in his heart to be brought into the spotlight. He only wished that the true certification would be that peace would come in the land of Kashmir. And he only wanted to show that, look, I as a Khalifa am appointed by God and divinely guided by Him. And so my actions are not because of my actions alone, but because of the guidance that Allah the Almighty has given me. And so we see that Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu also became a direct fulfillment of the prophecy to the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, where Allah Ta'ala revealed to the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam that Main hua Talut or Jalut hua mera shikar. Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam and his Jamaat were to be the Davids of the age, and they were to overcome Goliath. They were to overcome all the problems. And in the same way, Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one person, head of a small community, and he overcomes all the Goliaths of the age, and he's bringing about peace and tranquility into the hearts of Kashmir.
And with that, we've come to the end of this episode of Ahmadiyyat, Roots to Branches. The state of Muslims in Kashmir had been declining since the 1840s, and the situation worsened more so than ever before in 1931. And upon realizing this, it was none other than Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II, Hazrat al-Muslih al-Ma'ud raziyallahu ta'ala anhu, who was among the first leaders to call to action, as the promised Messiah ﷺ himself had elaborated upon the sanctity of Kashmir, especially for Muslims. It was in this way that none other than Hazrat Khalifatul-Masih II raziyallahu ta'ala anhu championed the efforts of granting the Muslims of Kashmir their freedom. So with that, Jazakumullah for watching. Until next time, when by the grace of God, Ahmadiyyat will have branched out even further. Assalamu alaikum.
हुआ कादियान का हर चार सू है शोहरा हुआ कादियान का मस्कन है जो के महदिए आखिर ज़मान का मस्कन है जो के महदिए आखिर ज़मान